Okay, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Berks County?
Okay. Berks County was in Reading, Pennsylvania, and that group was started originally by Jimmy Smith, Jerry Yoder, and Lou Augustine. And Lou was the woman, Mabel Lou Augustine was the woman who kind of came up to Lehigh-Ho, more or less, at various times, and lived in Reading. It was her residence. So they met in December, I believe, and then they had their first actual meeting in 1975, January 2nd, 1975, of the Reading group. Immediately after that, they came up to Lehigh-Ho, which would have met the third Saturday of the month, as they had done for years, and wanted to just get some guidance and to let them know that they were starting a group. Now they needed to know what to do and needed some friends, etc. So in response to that, I went to their meetings and started to go to their meetings and participated then for several years, actually. And I thought it was a remarkable group for a number of reasons. For one thing, it was at least half and half, and probably at times there were more women than there were men, and that was pretty rare in those days, very rare as a matter of fact. I remember Joe Jones and Jan Sweat were lovers. The significance of those two is that their activism had started in being the first women to go into the mines for Bethlehem Steel. Now, what those mines were, I don't know. I think they closed very long after that. I never found out if they were iron mines or coal mines, coke mines. The coal mines, I'm not sure. But that was their background when they came to us. They had just successfully won their battle, and they were very active. They were not at that time feminists. They became so certainly with the radicalization by Janet Cooper, who came around and really did a number on a lot of people, I think men and women, in terms of changing minds and attitudes and really being very forthright about supporting women's rights. My particular friend was Cindy Showalter, and Cindy and I decided that we hadn't ever really sat down and talked with the opposite sex. I never sat down and talked with a lesbian, and Cindy and I became very good friends as a result and spent a lot of time talking with each other. Yes, a lot of time talking with each other, which I enjoyed and learned a great deal about.
What was that like, talking to lesbians?
They were different. They were sexist for one thing. That I found very interesting. They really, in a way that we had given up in a sense. The men were less hooked up on male-female roles, and the women could tell you instantly. And this always amazed me that they could look at somebody coming in the door, and every one of them agreed that they were butch or femme, and that was the difference to them. And they knew, and that was something that they identified the women by. The handle that they identified the women by. And I think men had given that up by then. I don't remember that there were those kinds of distinctions about who is more femme or who is more butch, or that we didn't role play in that way. And I don't think they did either. It's silly, but they certainly identified it. I was so tickled by that. But the other thing that really amazed me and tickled me was that they were so quick in the identification. They could tell just by looking at them, and I couldn't see whatever they were looking at. I didn't know, but they were certainly very, very, very clear on what they saw. And
how big did this group become?
it never became very large. I don't suppose more than about 14 to 15 people at any one point. We would have very active meetings, and they enjoyed each other. Often came together. So we would spend. Ricky and I would go down to Reading sometimes two or three times a week to be at meetings. They were a very social group, and they really liked each other a great deal, both men and women. And so I talked about Jerry and Jimmy Smith, another guy by the name of they have to think of it in a minute. There were simply some men and more women, and the women were very active in terms of contributing a great deal to the caucus committees. They didn't, due to the leadership they would serve on committees a lot, and so that they supported that whole aspect of things wonderfully. They were very active and came to the conference and so on.
For the Pennsylvania Rural Gay Caucus?
Yeah, they were not outstanding leaders in their own right. Interestingly enough, the organization founded itself as a council. They wouldn't elect the president, and I think that there were two reasons for that. I always felt. One was because of my presence, and I would be the only experienced leader there. Would be the only person that really had 5 or 6 years by that time, 5 or 6 years of experience of leading in Lehigh-Ho, and so I really kind of knew what they were doing, and they didn't. I refused to be an officer. I wanted them to do it, and instead of doing that, I think there was a certain amount of territorial jealousy between them that they wanted everything to be level. So we operated as a council of 6 or 7 people who were the leadership, and we met and literally ruled by consensus in a sense. But we were extraordinarily active. We had every kind of thing going. We had what we call interest groups, and interest groups where if you were interested in something, you got some people to do it with you. And we call it an interest group, and generally that was people from the group that would do these 3 or 4 things. And we were continuously having meetings of various sorts. We did hay rides, we did letter writing committees, we did potlucks, we did dinners, we did everything you could imagine. An art group, it was an art support group. Jerry was a very big artist, very good artist. Jerry Yoder was a very good artist, and they may have done that professionally, I'm not sure. Jimmy Smith was the first president, as I recall. Jimmy was an interesting character himself. He was just kind of I call him flighty, but it's not. But flighty in a different sense that he really was just flitted from one thing to another. He never, and so he wasn't flighty in the sense that ordinarily would use it, but a bit of a bumbling bee. That's what I always thought of as. Just a delightful person in his own way, but not very effective with anything. He just kind of. But I think he became the first president, and then they didn't have any anymore. They went to council, eliminated that whole position, and I think we've got a treasurer. But I don't remember. Kevin Smith was the boy I was trying to remember. And the reason I want to remember Kevin is because he was the one who went out in the newspaper first. There was a little publication, Berks County. I don't remember what it was, but it was the weekly publication for the county. And he went to them and came out in big time and said, I'm gay, and we're going to fight for gay rights. Well, that's the first time. We were going to fight for gay rights in Reading. It was the first time I had heard about it, or anybody else had heard about it.
What was the reaction among gay folk?
That did not work well at all. The reaction was that the district attorney wrote a letter and said, "I will not meet with gays. I will not meet with gays." Whereupon Barry Gomes wrote a letter to the district attorney and said, "Yes, you will. You are an official of the county, and you can't turn it down." And he said, "Yes, I can," and did. But that was pretty much the end of that discussion too. We never did form anything. We never went forward any more than that. Partly because it had been so negative. And I don't remember what happened. I mean, that got to be public. That part of it got into the paper on both sides, and we argued for a while, but then we carried that forward there. On the other hand, we had such a great time. We just had so much fun being together and enjoying each other. It really was a joy to be in that organization, I thought. And the other thing, again, it was so unusual being so balanced between the male and female participation. I remember playing a baseball game one time, the last softball game I ever played, because I was playing with all these women. I'm thinking, oh Lord, I was so hurt the next day. I couldn't, for 3 days, I was just so stiff I couldn't move. And I said, never again, and never again with women either. They just whipped the hell out of me. Oh, it was terrible. And I really felt bad because I thought, geez, I was in pretty good shape, I thought. Oh no, not like they were. Not like they were. And I don't think we played more than 3 innings, but it was amazing.
So it sounds like everybody enjoyed each other's company.
Very, very much, very much. It was just a real joy to be with. The girls, Jan and Joe, moved off to Chicago, in a couple of years, they left me their dog. Uh, One that used to travel with me, the cockapoo and so on. Not a very popular, not popular in Mary's sights, as I recall. The picture was my constant companion, a wonderful, wonderful animal for me. And but I could understand that people didn't like her, like they didn't like my lover either. He was not a real popular person, and probably for the same reasons, I don't know.
Did the group get involved in any other kind of activism after the DA incident?
I don't think so. No, we were scattered. We were scattered. Jerry Yoder would have an idea a minute, and so Jerry was real hard to keep up with. And one of his ideas, as I recall, in that year, because he was this kind of artist, he drew a stamp to sign that he put the Liberty Bell on. Now this is 1976, right? This is we're celebrating the 200th years of 1776, and Jerry wants to put a Liberty Bell on a stamp. I mean, it's just a freaky idea. Now we got the first stamp came out, the Harvey Milk stamp just came out now, 40 years later. So what does we have back in those days? I don't know, but he tried, and we supported it. And we had these letter writing campaigns to get it, and took around and try to get new people to read it, and have all the organizations in Pennsylvania to be part of it, and write in support of the stamp, because that's how you get stamps made. Is write to the advisory. Well, there was no chance at all. But that's the sort of thing that Jerry would do. He just had these flipped off these ideas, and we just got exhausted trying to keep up with him, and we tried to implement ideas and do all these various things. It just was crazy. But it was real fun, and I don't remember what happened to them ultimately. I can't. I'm trying to remember what was the end of that organization, what was the end of my participation in it. I don't know. I just faded out, and I don't remember what quite happened. Whether it couldn't have lasted until '83, I don't think. It started in '75, and my thought that it might have lasted until '78. Maybe around the first time of the first conference. I'm sure that they participated in that, the first Pride conference. I don't remember after that, and I can't say what happened to those people. I don't know. And again, one of those things I've been trying to find out. I would love to know what happened to Augustine. I'd love to know what happened to Cindy Showalter. I'd love to know what happened to Kevin Smith. Did I say Kevin Smith? Yes. And I don't know.
Well, we'll try to find out where they went.
Yeah, it would be nice, because there were 3 bars in Reading. I think 1 or 2 of them are still in existence. The last door, I believe, was still there. At that time, I was young enough to go to bars, and we did that sort of thing. It wasn't a big bar. We hardly made that our center of our life at all. We were centered in each other, and occasionally went to bars. And the bars was relatively supportive, if I recall. I think they did some fundraising for us, and maybe for the caucus. I'm not sure. Back in those days.
Where your
Rosemary's bar did that in Allentown.
Okay.
I remember the conferences.
Your socializing outside the bar, is that fairly typical for most of the people
Well,
in your circle?
that was always the importance I always felt of the gay organizations. Okay, so you provide that social outlet that wasn't the bar, that wasn't some place where you were putting your sex on the line, in which you were putting that face of yourself on the line, and that ego involvement. In other words, you could really that was what I felt was one of the major contributions of what gay organizations were doing, and the kinds of things that they were generating. We were about generating community. Was probably our real big function. And when I think about the fact that these groups did not accomplish anything, there was no legacy following GCS. What was important about it was that it formed that sort of community, and was really a pump of making people out, of getting people out and feeling proud about themselves and being active. And when we got in the paper, or we met and did public things, and went to the bars and took all our little, our things for the brochures for the conferences and so on, or for lobby day or whatever we were doing. It really provided the impetus for activism. And for that sort of thing that sort of awareness, I think, in the community, to make that a part of the community, supporting the larger community was a part of what you were supposed to be if you were a gay person, and I really think that worked, and that was the legacy that all these groups ultimately left. Is our community building was what really has resulted in today's life. And I was conscious of the fact that that's what we needed to do. That was my thought, is that we needed, the community building. It didn't matter who came, it mattered that the people who came got what they wanted from it, what they needed from it. And boy, it worked every time. You can see the history of groups, the curve that groups go through, in which they become the major impetus that they become, which is when people are really taking from the organization what they need to take, which is the kind of support and talking about my life and your life, and talking to each other and making community, the whole bit about community. But being able to make that breakthrough, which had never been there before, we were not about it. And I think I was stunned to remember that we were so inward. We depended on ourselves in the first place, so that when we did things or activities, we didn't go to the experts outside of ourselves. We didn't have the doctors, we didn't have the lawyers. We were our own activists, and we did what we had to do. For instance, if there was a problem in Bloomsburg, we went up and addressed the problem. When Danny in Williamsport had trouble and was having trouble in his home being attacked on a regular basis, we went up and tried to respond to that. When Sam Edmonds in Bloomsburg was attacked in dormitories, we went and tried to respond to that. When somebody committed suicide in the schools, we tried to address that issue. But we did it ourselves. We didn't go outside. And I think that what I found when I went to Chicago, for instance, was that we didn't do outreach. We didn't reach out to the alliances and to people outside of ourselves. We didn't think about them as being. We needed to get together internally so that the gay people drew together, and that was our function, I think. But again, we missed the whole ball game in not reaching out. That I didn't even realize until later on that was possible. There were allies. There were people, especially who. I remember, for instance, there was the president of the Council of Churches in Allentown was a gay person who came up to me, and this happened a lot, and this happens a lot when and I'm sure it's happened to you, that people come out to you privately and who are in positions of authority, positions being able to help you, and will say, "I'm gay, and I want you to know that, and I want you to know that I'm working behind the scenes." And literally, and they were enormous support, always had been. So they were our allies, but they were also secret, closeted gays, very often. And that was important. John Folby, I think, would be in that position when he was doing the AIDS business, was pretty closeted. Should I say that here? I shouldn't say that here. Don't bring out people that you don't know about. But John is out now and has been out for long. That doesn't make a difference.
Well, one of the talking about community building, one of the things that you were involved in was the switchboard in the Allentown area.
Oh, that was much later, and I will get into that because that was really an outshoot of, remember. Okay. Early in, and I don't know the year. Barry Weaver and I went to...
Barry Weaver from Lancaster.
Barry Weaver from Lancaster, and I went to the switchboard at Reading, and I think that we had an idea that we could go there and get some ideas as to how to start a gay switchboard. He did so in Lancaster. After that visit, I didn't. I went there for 2 years and trained with them. It was a 10-week training period to learn to be a switchboard operator, to work with suicide line in Reading. Ricky and I did that for 2 years, and then we formed a group in Allentown because suicide is a very serious matter, and that's what you learned when you did the training, is that you don't fool around with this stuff. You do some training, and you don't just throw yourself into it. You don't just do it on an amateur basis. You do it with some, at least some idea of awareness of how serious it is and the issues that come up. And they were serious issues when it would come up when you were on the switchboard. I think Roger had done it in Harrisburg, and I don't remember what year he was involved. I think it was after us, as I recall. I remember going to the switchboard and sitting in going to the switchboard room and sitting there for a while.
Yeah, there was a switchboard in Harrisburg.
In Harrisburg. But I think that might have been afterwards.
What did you learn from being a part of that switchboard experience?
Oh, everything. You learn how to talk to people, listen. It was the main thing, to really listen and to pick up and talk to people. And I think I learned a lot about just talking to people. I was a very shy individual, very introverted, shy individual. And you certainly couldn't be on a switchboard, and that was the whole thing. But also you weren't face to face with people. But you had to deal with whoever came along, and wherever they were, you had to deal with them. I only had a couple of serious cases, but some of them were serious, really serious. I may talk about one later. Okay.
Well, how long did
the switchboard followed a whole different period. That was moved to Allentown in '77. Okay, this should be 2 years later. And Allentown was, I was a member of Lehigh Ho, which was located in Bethlehem. At that time, Dixie White and Carol Block came to me, and they were now members. Dixie was later on, became the president of Pennsylvania Now within a year or two, I think '78, as I recall, was when she began her term of service, 2-year term of service. But she said, the Allentown Human Relations Commission is now considering adding some new coverage, and we want to put in for gay rights and for handicapped, whatever it was an umbrella of several things. And because I thought it was important that we didn't do just gay rights, that we were looking at, because too often the gay movement has done this to itself. It fights for gay rights in a narrow frame, and it really doesn't think about it. It doesn't think about broader issues, doesn't get itself involved in broader issues. For instance, I think the fact that when I talk about the lack of women, the fact that the men got in charge of the organizations and they dealt with male issues, literally, never talked about the fact of whether of child support or females, and a big deal back in that day when women were not able to keep their children, were losing right and left because of the lesbian issue. And that men were silent on that. They never saw the need to defend on that issue or to support women in that way. And vocally, say it out loud, put it in your newspaper, because Now did that consistently. This was the importance of Now, is that they always, every conference that you went to, every meeting that you went to, or anything that was really public, they always mentioned gay rights. They always put that support right out there, right out front. And that was tremendously helpful and very impressive, very impressive. And that was at all levels. And I was, so what happened with that is that we went then to city council. We went to, we talked to a few people, a councilman that we knew was in favor of gay rights, of adding these to the commission, because the city council would have to approve that. Okay, we went to the Human Relations Commission itself, talked with them, and they were in favor, all except for one person, as I recall, who really was very vociferously against. And we had quite some discussions, lengthy discussions with them, and went to their meetings, went to city council, talked to city council. I'll never forget that, because I spoke to city council for the first time, I think somehow I got on the radio, and I don't know if they did an interview or if they were recording that session or whatever. The next morning, I'm just scared stiff because I'm thinking I'm the most hated person in Allentown, the most hated person around, because I really know have now come out publicly, very publicly, in terms of newspaper and radio and so on.
This was after the city council meeting?
This was after the city
The
council
public
meeting,
meeting?
and there was nothing. You know, now I had been out for a number of years, but I'd never been publicly out in that way, and which I'm really addressing, and getting my face out in my name and my voice and all that kind of stuff. Literally, I'm sitting at work listening to my own voice on the radio. Oh my God, I really. Fortunately, most of the people who were there were Puerto Rican and really speak a lot of English and might not have recognized me. But it was a funny day because I just felt I may not live to get home. I don't know what's going to happen.
But
So
no one
we
else
talked to city
confronted
council.
you after that?
Talked to city council, and they there were some issues. We went back 4 or 5 months. I don't remember how long this went on. But ultimately, the position of some of the members of city council was that we will not allow you to speak anymore. Okay, so this is when we really became serious, and we as soon as we went to city council, then we formed an organization. There was an opposing group. There was a person by the name of Frank. Or he put it in the library, I don't remember which. At any rate, what I did was write a letter back to and refuting whatever he had written and put that in the library. That's totally lost. I have no idea what happened to either of those papers anymore. But that was where the argument also went to. The intellectual argument was worded down in the paper. The IHO began to support us. We got the caucus to come out. All kinds of people, anybody that we could get to come and support us and speak for us was welcome to come to city council and do that. And we got, the IO did that relatively frequently. We would just represent, I would put on a different hat, depending on what I wasn't that night, or what was needed that night. I might be the caucus, I might be the local organization, or whatever. At any rate, so we had this ad hoc organization, which was created for and meant to support the effort for getting the city council
to approve the ordinance.
Approve the ordinance, and
this was against discrimination.
Yes, and this was against discrimination. And that was the point at which we had a rally at one point. Remember, now we had a number of rallies that we had, because the city council kept doing these crazy things like we couldn't talk. Or you can't meet. The first rally we had, we sat down outside the door, and we came out of the closet. Opened the door, and then we all ran around the streets, coming out of the closet. We had a bunch of meetings. The rally then that you came to, as a matter of fact, and was speaker of as person of the Rural Caucus, and I think by that time, I think Dixie was president of now, as I recall. She was state president, and she also spoke. And we had that in a park. That was the first time. That was the first time we had a demonstration in Allentown. We had a rally that day, as I recall. We had a parade. Was that right? Yes, that day we had a parade. And the next day, of course, you guys went to North and had that thing in Williamsport, which is a whole different story. That's Dan's story, and I'll let him tell it. But that happened that same weekend. You appeared Saturday with me, and Sunday you went up there. That was the day that I let the speakers. Somebody was up in the hill protesting, and I said, "Okay, come down here and speak." And everybody was mad at me. It's also, but I think free speech is free speech. I wanted them to see that they can have their say, and it means absolutely nothing. Okay, give them their 2 minutes in the light, and then go away. Hopefully, it's what I was hoping was going to happen. But I also believe enough in free speech that it's important to give people there say, well, nobody wanted to do it because they're on our time. They're taking up they're crowding our space, and this is the difference of philosophy.
Let me
But that
just
minister
ask you a
did speak,
question.
that
Would
minister did not.
you invited the antis to speak, or, okay.
There was a minister up there.
But they declined.
That had been leading, yeah, and they had little signs up on top of the hill, and we're down in the amphitheater. And so we had him come down and speak for a second, and he was totally unaffected, and that's what I wanted to know. Is that you just, you know, like I'm preaching to the choir, he's also preaching to the choir, except it's not just choir, and he's not gonna make any headway. Interesting, we had a group from Philadelphia, it was a peace group, a professor of peace at the University of Pennsylvania, a young man, a young Quaker man, and had formed a commune, and they came up with these wonderful flags. This was so superb. This is a socialist technique. This is what socialists do to you. And if you ever remember the socialist signs, when we marched, socialists would come, had this great big banner, and would go up and right across the whole street. So they would march in the middle of, get in the middle of all the people that they could get, and it looked like they were huge. There were two people that were socialists carrying the sign, but it was wonderful, and that's what this group did. They had these marvelously large flags, a red one, I'm sorry, an orange one, and a yellow one, and that's all it was. There wasn't anything on them. They were just big, colorful flags. And I remember marching in those things, and we was feeling so proud and so happy, and so wise about, you know, what remarkable technique this is to make work, and they did.
Well, what happened to the ordinance at that time?
Nothing. The city solicitor did a judgment that said we can't pass them because the state, gay rights are not legal in the state. In other words, it's still homosexuality, it's still illegal in the state. So we cannot have. And no, it was the Human Relations Commission had not passed. We cannot exceed the authority of the Human Relations Commission, and as I recall, it was illegal. Okay, and so we just had to drop it at that point. We didn't go on meeting for a while, and again, we were just having so much fun, as an organization. This was a lot of women. Some black people were involved, which is one of the few times that really there were some black people who came to the meetings, and I was very pleased with that because we tried. Dixie was such a good friend and such a wonderful leader and theorist, and she taught me so much about supporting, getting other organizations, making coalitions, and how you do it, and you need to normally outreach, which you need to go out and support. You need to go to their meetings. You need to go to a black church if they're having a Martin Luther King Day. You go sit in the pew and be a part of their situation, which is a practice that we could follow after that. But I really didn't know before how to do these things, and she was such a gift in that, in terms of the coalition building. And now it was such a gift in that. I was so happy to belong to now, because it was my model. I was sure that this was going to be the model for the future of the gay movement, except that the now organizations had broad canvases, had broad issues, had numbers and numbers of issues that they were involved in. From women's health, from daycare to wages, to non-politics. Dixie said, we don't want to take positions. That's really that. We don't want to do that. We're political, but we're political support. We're not political people. Okay, and if we do that, then we buy into the establishment, and we can't fight it if we do. Another thing you said that it was a wonderful thing that I'll never forget, that I thought was such a great lesson, is don't put in today's world what you don't want in tomorrow's world. So don't put sexism in today's world. If you don't be sexist in any way, don't put in today's world what you don't want in tomorrow's world. You just eliminate it. This is no longer what we do. And it was a great piece of advice, and I've really tried to think about that since then, about don't pay attention, don't be a part of that game. Play your own game, the one that's including with your integrity, including with your tomorrow. Create your tomorrow today by living that life, and I just think that was incredibly smart in terms of organization. So that you don't. What we did with organizations, I think we tried to be careful about not keeping it for tomorrow, not shaping it, so that we have to live with what we didn't want to live with. But then, okay, they were part of that. They were very supportive. A lot of people were. Lehigh was supportive. The Lepoco came. Lots of people, all the activists came and supported us. And the Human Relations Commission supported us. But it simply didn't work out. I mean, we left it at that point. Now, what also happened is that there was some leftists who were involved in something happened that they were involved in there, and I've forgotten. They called it the Muhlenberg Five or something like that. But they were socialists that were a part of our organization. And we got in. They were the ones who wanted us to fight, especially on the free speech issue, which is very important. And it was true that free speech, when you were told by City Council that you cannot speak, we won't hear you. That's a free speech issue. So we after that was the fight that continued after the fight for after we gave up the gay rights thing. We knew we weren't going to do it. That didn't happen, as a matter of fact, until 2000 something, and I don't know who did this. I met the women in Harrisburg at the Pride Conference, or at the Pride Day. We were just talking one time, and I met these were the women who, in fact, had led the fight in 2000 to get
for the ordinance in Allentown.
Yeah, the ordinance in Allentown, which did finally work out. And that was what, from 1970, 77, 78 till then. And clearly they didn't know about my organization. I didn't need to say anything. That was a long past history. But I was very pleased to know and to meet these women that had actually brought it to fruition at a later time. Really thrilled. So I didn't know what to do at that point about fighting it, quite frankly. We just simply dropped it, and I left the state before very much longer than that. But Lehigh, that was an important ad hoc organization. This was the organization that gave birth to the.
Did you speak at that public meeting on before council?
Oh yeah.
On the ordinance.
Oh yeah. We spoke a number of times. We spoke every meeting to the ordinance. Right. In favor of the ordinance, as long as they would let us. At the meeting in which which they had silenced us, that next meeting we went in, and when it came time for public discussion, they announced public discussion. We all put tape over our mouths to indicate that we had been silenced. And what happened with that was a person from the opposition stood up and said, we talked about gay rights. And then City Council said, okay, we gave up. Okay, we take back our words. We changed what we have said before. We changed the ruling before. Now you can talk about it. That was the end of it. That was all we really wanted. Now we had won the issue of free speech, but we did it to the opposition, which was funny. But that was a victory. It's the same. It was all the same. It was important to do that. Very important to go in and represent the free speech issue. Absolutely. I just thought it was remarkable that they were the ones that broke the rule and got away with it, made the change, and it's not without paper. Okay, there wasn't okay. That was the group that formed the Gay Line. It was called in Allentown, and it was literally my part. We got a local group to do the training for us. It was the
Gay Line. What was that?
Gay Line. No, there was a group of that did drug therapy, and I had been involved with them. I had gone there as a non-druggie, okay, but they ran therapy groups, and I was very impressed with him, really, really liked him a whole lot. And got so much out of that time in my life. It was so important for me to go and clean up the whole, review the whole psychological thing, and I really emerged as a different person as a result of that in 78 to 80. I think I went for 2 full years to them, right next door to me, as a matter of fact. It was called Confront, but they did the training then for Switchboard about how to handle these serious matters that came up, and gave us a place to meet, and ultimately then the Switchboard worked through my apartment. I had a new apartment. I had just divorced, so I got an apartment that had a back door that the people could come into and not bother to come through the house. It was the fire escape, and they'd come up the fire escape and go into the room with the Switchboard. And that lasted for 2 years. I moved to Bethlehem, moved the telephone line right along. But then it folded. Okay, after I left Bethlehem and went back to Allentown, that thing folded.
The switchboard didn't continue after
I'm
that?
sorry?
The switchboard did not continue after that?
That was 78. That was 78, I think, 79 to 80. And then I was living in Allentown, separated by myself. Ricky was out of the picture. Ricky was down the street. My lover was down the street.
Is there anything you want to tell us about between, say, 1980 and 83 when you went to Chicago? What was your life like then? I mean, you were still involved with the rural gay caucus.
Oh yeah. I was
the
very
pride
involved. I
conferences.
was involved, but I was also out of it. Remember, Ricky was my ride, and Ricky, my lover, was a person who was different with me than he was with everybody else, and he took me to all the meetings that I wanted to, all the meetings of the caucus. And remember, we were meeting all over the damn state because we didn't have a home, we didn't have a central place. We had a church on Sundays once a month at the Friends Meeting House. After that, then we would meet wherever we could meet, and wherever people, like, if they were the person in charge of the committee, they could name their own hometown. That's where we'd go for a meeting, even if it were a committee meeting or whatever. And Ricky did that for me. He just drove everywhere. He loved to drive. That was his big thing. So I didn't have a car after that. And therefore, I really was very handicapped in terms of being able to get around to do some of the things that I wanted to. I still made it one way or another. I got to almost all the meetings, other caucus, but I didn't get to other meetings that I couldn't be as participant. We had the first conference, the second conference, and then after that I wasn't able to be at the third conference. Couldn't do it. And then the fourth conference is the one that we planned, and I left town, and you had to finish up. But that was caucus material, and so that was one of the periods in which I was inactive. The same thing happened in Lehigh Ho. You get a lover, and you really back off, and you get a divorce, and sometimes you back off, and so Ricky and I separated, and life changed for me to a certain degree. But a lot of the therapy changed me too, in terms of becoming, I felt much more of a person, a whole person, in terms of doing this wonderful therapy business that they did. And it was very important. I don't think the Gay Line did its thing. It was mostly informational, was its purpose. And I don't recall that there were any really serious things that came in on Gay Line. We didn't have to get any suicide calls. This didn't happen to us, fortunately. So those were really frightening if it ever happened to you. But it went for those couple of years, and it operated through my house. Good people, but I only ever did that first 10 group of 10 people, as I recall. And then we just never needed any more. Never got any more. They did it 2 years later in '82, I think. They originated, or 80 something, they re-originated the gay line, reinstituted a gay line. I think that it operated through a LBGT center that they had in Allentown at that time. They had it for a few years. They had it up until 82, maybe 85, when the center closed. I don't know how it opened. I was out of town, and so I went back one time and found out that it was there and went to see them, and saw that Lehigh Ho has now had its offices there, or had the library there, it was off in the corner. Lehigh Ho was meeting there when I was meeting, and Lehigh Ho was running the newsletter for the larger organization now called the Lehigh Valley Times, I think, or something like that, instead of the Lehigh, whatever Lehigh newsletter was. And they went till '84, I think, and then that whole organization closed out. And I don't know what happened to Lehigh Ho. I went to Allentown Library to find out, and what I could find out, their last public statement, I believe, was in '83, about the time that center closed. '83? No. I'm sorry. '87. And I don't know after that. I do know. I think Lehigh Ho had a 20th anniversary. I know that. Had a 20th anniversary party. Because I talked to Ron Seeds. That was the last time I talked to Ron. Or sometime after that, said, Ron, do you believe that we're around 20 years? We had an organization that lasted for 20 years. Amazing thing. And I don't know after that. There was evidence that they were around for a year or two, that somebody kept in the newspaper box. But I don't know the termination date. I never found out. I don't know. And I never found out what happened to Lehigh Ho Library, which is one thing I really wanted to know. Was I'm sure because the people, they were so proud of it and so serious about it, and really, kept contributing to it and making this larger collection and adding to it in terms of magazines and magazine articles and anything any clippings, whatever they could add to it, that it became a serious and weighty thing that would be a wonderful resource if we could find it. But I'm sure it did not go to, Connecticut was formed before Lehigh Ho folded. That's all I know. So I don't think that they got the library, and I never found out. But I would love to know what happened to it. It was intact. I had it before I left. I had it in 1980. The library was in my house because they didn't have anywhere else to store it. And this is the problem when you don't have homes, when you don't have buildings. Then you have storage problems like we do with the library. If you're with 300 or 400 books, where do they go? And all I had were the books. I didn't have the other files. I didn't have the magazines and stuff that had built up that I don't know about. I didn't know where that stuff was. And I assumed that Ron Seeds kept it because he had a house, and his lover had been active in terms of being an archivist for Lehigh Ho organization. Just don't know what happened to it. Can't find out. Have not been able to find out.
What led to your decision to go to Chicago?
Lover. Met Doug in 1980, and he was traveling from Chicago. Doug was a airline reservationist. One of the things about working for an airline, if you don't know this, it used to be that you could fly all over the world. You had privileges to go. You could go, literally, almost go on the airline. You had to get a ticket, and you had to have a standby. But as a matter of fact, you could go all over the world on virtually any airline. They had interline agreements with them, and I took a couple of those trips with him. Ultimately, it was Pan Am he worked for first, and Pan Am was the world's biggest airline at that time, and was the real originator of airlines in terms of routing and so on, and it really had a reach that went all over the world. And every time they wanted to go anywhere, that they wanted to have a diplomatic mission, then said, okay, then the president said, we're going to run an airline there, give us permission and guarantee our wages, which is what they did. It guaranteed us a profit. So Pan Am had this incredible reach, and we could go anywhere, and we did go to some places. But that's, because he had that, he came out to Allentown for free. And so he came for about, 6 months or so. And I said, okay, this is really nice, but we aren't going to be lovers. And that was a year later. I met him first in October. A year later, on New Year's Eve, I proposed to him. I said, okay, I'll give up. I really do want to marry you. And that's how I got to Chicago. That's when he had to decide if we wanted to be lovers. It was good. It was good. It was a good life with Doug. Well, it was a good life for 18 years, and then he divorced me. Okay, and that was kind of good because it was really Doug coming into his own. And Doug had always didn't stand up for himself, I think. And I said, the one thing I wanted was for him to stand up for himself. He did, and I lost him. Isn't that funny? I just think that's kind of an irony. But he really did. We divided right down to the teaspoons when we separated. That was a hard decision, and it was a long time enacting that between, I think it happened in 88 and in 90. I'm sorry, in 1998, and then in 2000 we actually separated. That's when I came here. 2 years later, we had to sell it, get the house ready to sell and sell it and all that kind of stuff. 2 years in enacting that. About a year and a half.
What'd you do in Chicago?
I didn't mean to get that far ahead because I want to stay with organizations in a minute.
Okay.
And just to throw in a couple of organizations while we're doing an oral thing, just to reconnect. There was an SBGU that Sam Dietz did, and I think you did an interview with Sam. Finally, is that correct? I didn't. You did Sam Dietz interview?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And you did, and Sam had he told you about SBGU at that time, and the council.
Susquehanna Valley.
Susquehanna Valley Gays, in Northumberland, which, if you know Northumberland, is a little tiny place next to Sunbury.
Right.
And with 4,000 population, we were so tickled because we had the smallest town with a gay organization in it.
Yeah, you remember driving up there all the time.
And so Sam did that, and the offshoot of that was Danny and Williamsport got inspired by belonging to that organization, and then Danny went through 6 or 7 organizations up there. Just to throw these names out, and so that they become a part of it. Okay, I've been saving talking about the caucus because I want to have that conversation with you. I want to do a mutual interview in which you and I are together talking about the caucus. I think that's a good thing for us to do. We've done it before, but I think we need to do it one last time, more officially, so that we really are sure what we need to cover.
If you want to do it that way, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. What are the organizations I belong to? Allentown Now. It was Dixie's idea that there was a very large chapter, a very, very large active chapter in Lehigh Valley, called the Lehigh Valley Now organization, and it was an umbrella organization in terms of the fact it covered Easton. There were no other organizations that covered the Lehigh Valley, so it really drew from all this broad base of people. Very good organization. Now at that time, we're talking about the 1980s, and remember that was the ERA era.
'70s and '80s.
When we were looking for the ERA, and we did an awful lot of things. We did an awful lot of things with the ERA. We did a great deal of support for the ERA. That's one of the things about that GCS did, the letter writing campaigns, for instance, and Lehigh Ho didn't. But Geez, yes, the Coordinating Society in Reading did. My lover did a banner for them. I always, the one that's in the iconic picture of the project is Ricky standing there with his banner that he had made. He also made the banner in front of us. My lover made the banner in front of us. He was very adept with his hands, very intelligent hands in a way that his mind was not as intelligent as his hands were. In terms of real talent, I mean, he could do anything with his hands. Knitted, crocheted, did macrame like crazy. Just automatically. I really depend on Ricky some things. He wasn't the brightest bulb in the world, but he saw things. Because he saw the surface. I'm not the surface person. I was trying to get down, and I dismissed the surface. And Ricky could tell you that people were left-handed or right-handed, or that they limped or whatever. I didn't see those things. He always did. And I felt I depended on him for it. There was smartness about it. So I talked about him being, at one point I talked about Ricky being different, that he would take me to all those meetings, never complain, but people didn't like him. There was something about Ricky, I don't know what, that I do know what, that people didn't care for him. And he didn't speak, he spoke rarely at meetings. He didn't have a whole lot to say, and did other things. Other things during the meetings. But he was an enormous support, and I'm very grateful for that. I know him today. I shouldn't throw this out here, but I will. He's living with a woman. He's lived with a woman for 30 years. Blows me away. Now he's not having sex with her, but he's living with a woman, and has done that again for 30 years since within a year or two after we separated. Right after Doug, after I moved to Chicago, he got together with this woman that he's still with, and living in Allentown. Stubborn, diabetic, heavy. Weighs about 300 and something pounds. Sad story, and also very difficult for me to know, because for the same reasons that he was uncommunicative then, he is still uncommunicative now, and difficult to speak to. He doesn't understand me. I could talk to him all day long and find out that he didn't understand a word. He'd sit there and say, really, and he didn't know what I was talking about. It's weird. Doug was always so different, because Doug I always wanted to hear. I didn't care what he said. Literally, this wasn't a conversationalist. I loved him very much, but it was difficult because he was a difficult personality, I think. And I still care, but at the same time, it's just as stubborn as he ever was. Hard to know. Organizations again. Allentown Now was about 14 of us, as I recall. Very active people. And
what did you say? I'm sorry.
Allentown Now,
yes.
National Organization for Women. And this was a group that Dixie fostered when she was president of the state president. And she said, as many people, and this was true, this I knew beforehand, but I think it may have been one of her bits of wisdom, is that as many organizations as you have, you get that many more activists. Okay, so she was in favor of creating as many organizations as she possibly could. So she created Allentown Now, as opposed to Lehigh Valley Now. And there were 14 of us, and we were a really active group. We were the most mixed group. We were family. Her cousin came. The cousin's mother came. We were black. We were Hispanic. We were Chinese. We were male, female, gay, straight, everything. We were so proud of that, because we really felt that we were the most mixed organization that you could get. And only 14 of us, and we were active. We went to all kinds of marches in Washington. ERA, we went out to the Great March in Chicago. after, when they did the first rally, the big rally in Chicago. I remember going out there and arriving in Chicago early morning. Didn't spend a dime in Illinois because we weren't about to support their economy.
Because they hadn't passed the ERA.
Because they had voted against. They had taken. I think they had taken back.
Yeah, they rescinded their vote.
And I went to Washington. The marches in Washington. A great big march. A vast march of 100,000, 200,000 people. I don't know. It was incredible. And the march on Washington. 78. That was the gay march in Washington, 1978. Were you involved in that? We went to Philadelphia first. Philadelphia did the organizing meeting for the march. They weren't sure they were going to have one, so they had this. I think the meeting was either in 78 or 79, and then they actually did not march until the next year. It was the first march in Washington, and it was a huge.
I marched, but I wasn't
Friends
involved
Meeting
with
House.
the planning.
Met at the Friends Meeting House. Do you remember these things? Do you remember these details?
A little bit.
Okay. We met at the Friends Meeting House, and it was a great clash between women who were really, very, very saying, include us, these are our issues, and pay attention to us. I remember how strong they were with that, and very forthright in terms of really bringing up women's issues and making the guys pay attention to it in a way that they hadn't really seen before. This was not a confronted meeting, but in a certain sense, it really was also. It was confronted, and it was confronted between people in Texas who were much more human rights people, as opposed to Texas was human rights, so that they had that kind of broad agenda. Pennsylvania went through the council, did the LGBT business, which is subtly different. Okay, your emphasis is subtly different. When that's your focus, okay, human rights can be a much broader issue, and be a milder presentation to the public than LGBT, which is a little more in your face, and a little more inclusive in terms of really being very vociferous about transvestites and transsexuals, and really representing those people and making them a part of our existence. That you just didn't find it necessarily. And I was in Texas, so I know something a little bit of this organization, and some of that difference. But that's where they came from. There was a whole big group there that represented at that particular conference. I recall they were very strong and really very much behind. May have originated the idea of the march. I'm not sure, but they came to Philadelphia, and then we had this great conference, great confab. With the
And Lisa White was representing all the transsexuals, transgender people at that time. She was very active in the Philadelphia area and with the caucus.
Right.
She brought us around to talk to be able to take in a lot of transgender issues and what they were up against.
Yeah.
This is for the next interview.